In 1770, a 14-year-old Austrian girl crossed into France and was forced to surrender everything at the border: her clothes, her servants, even her little dog. But one thing she smuggled into Versailles inside her own memory was a hunger for foods the French court would come to whisper about. Most people think Marie Antoinette only said, "Let them eat cake." She never said it. The truth is stranger. Number 14 on this list scandalized her own ladies-in-waiting. And number 3 was molded into porcelain so shocking that people still argue about it today. These 25 cravings helped earn her the nickname Madame Deficit. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forbidden foods Marie Antoinette was secretly obsessed with. Number 25. Imported water from Ville d'Avray. Before anything touched the Queen's lips, the water did, and she was impossible about it. Marie Antoinette refused to drink from the Seine, which by then ran thick with the filth of Paris. Instead, she demanded spring water hauled in sealed pewter flasks from the village of Ville d'Avray, miles outside the city. Carriages made the trip constantly. The water was tested, decanted, and kept cool for a woman who could taste the difference between one well and another. To a starving peasant, water was water. To the Queen, ordinary water was undrinkable. It seems like a small thing until you remember that an entire route of horses and men existed for one purpose: to keep her glass pure. This was where the obsession started. Number 24. Lemonade and sugar water. Here is something the movies get wrong. Sofia Coppola's film shows the Queen drowning in champagne, but the records say Marie Antoinette barely drank alcohol at all. Her real vice was sweet, cold, and harmless. She loved lemonade and plain sugar water, scented faintly with orange blossom, sipped throughout the day from delicate glasses. Her favorite trick was to dip a small dry biscuit into the glass and eat it half-soaked, the way a child would. She did this in front of ambassadors. She did this in front of her court, a Queen of France, the most watched woman in Europe, quietly dunking biscuits in lemonade like a girl at a kitchen table. The whole legend of the drunken party queen was built on a foundation that was mostly sugar and citrus. Number 23. Wafers. Thin, crisp, almost weightless, the gaufrette was the Queen's idea of a perfect snack. Royal pastry cooks pressed sweet batter between hot irons until it baked into sheets so delicate they shattered at a touch, then rolled them while warm into fragile little tubes. They tasted of nothing but butter, sugar, and air. Marie Antoinette ate them by the handful between meals, sometimes with a spoonful of cream tucked inside. They cost the kitchen almost nothing in ingredients, but the labor was relentless because a wafer had to be served the moment it cooled or it went soft and was thrown away. So the irons ran all day. A constant supply of perfect fresh wafers waiting for a queen who might want one or might not. The waste was the point. Number 22. Crystallized fruits. This is one of the foods that helped bankrupt a kitchen. Whole fruits, cherries, apricots, plums, violets, even rose petals were boiled gently in sugar syrup over days until the sugar replaced the water inside them, leaving a jewel that glittered and never spoiled. The process used staggering amounts of sugar, which in the 1700s was a luxury closer to gold than to a pantry staple. Marie Antoinette adored them. She kept dishes of crystallized fruit in her private rooms and offered them to her closest friends like precious stones. Each piece represented hours of a confectioner's time and a fortune in imported sugar from the colonies. Multiply that across a court that ran year-round, and you begin to understand how a woman who ate so daintily still cost so much. Number 21. Petits fours. Long before the dainty squares in glass bakery cases, the petit four was a Versailles invention born from thrift, of all things. The name means small oven because bakers used the dying heat of a cooling oven to bake these tiny cakes after the bread was done. But in the Queen's kitchen, nothing about them stayed thrifty. Almond sponge, apricot glaze, fondant icing, a candied flower placed on top with tweezers. Each one was the size of a thumb and took as much skill as a full cake. Marie Antoinette would eat 2 or 3 and leave a tray of 40 untouched. The rest went to her household or simply went stale. She liked them best in the afternoon, with coffee in private, away from the eyes that judged every bite a queen took in public. Number 20. Almond macaroons. Forget the rainbow macarons in Parisian windows today. Those came a century after she died. The queen's version was older and humbler, a rough little cookie of ground almonds, sugar, and beaten egg whites, crackled on top and chewy in the middle. Convents had baked them for generations. But Marie Antoinette loved them, and legend ties her so tightly to the treat that bakeries still trade on her name. There is even a story that two nuns fleeing the revolution survived by baking and selling these almond cookies, the Macaron Sisters of Nancy. Whether or not the queen ever met them, the almond macaroon was exactly her kind of food. Simple ingredients, transformed by patience into something that tasted far richer than it cost to make. First pattern break. Here is where the food becomes political. At Versailles, eating was not private. It was a performance called the Grand Couvre, where the king and queen sat at a table on a raised platform and ate dinner while crowds of strangers filed past to watch them chew. Tourists, courtiers, anyone decently dressed could come and stare. Marie Antoinette hated it. She found it grotesque to lift a fork while 100 faces watched her jaw move, and she pushed to limit the spectacle to once a week. That single act, a young queen wanting to eat in peace, was treated as a scandal. So nearly everything she truly loved to eat, she ate in secret. The forbidden part was not always the food. Sometimes it was simply the privacy. Number 19. Wild strawberries. Not the fat, watery berries you buy today. The queen craved fraises des bois, tiny wild strawberries the size of a fingernail, intensely sweet and gone in a bite. At her private retreat, she had them grown by the basketful, and she liked to eat them within minutes of picking before the perfume faded. She would have them with a splash of cream or simply rolled in sugar. To get a single bowl of these took an army of gardeners crawling through beds at dawn. The berries bruised if you breathed on them and rotted within a day, which made them the perfect royal indulgence, impossible to store, impossible to fake, gone almost as soon as they arrived. A flavor you could only have if you were a queen. Number 18. Cherries. The queen loved cherries with an impatience that drove her gardeners half mad. She wanted them perfect, deep red, glossy, and ripe to the exact day. And she wanted them long before the season would naturally allow. So the royal gardens forced them early under glass and straw, coaxing cherries from trees that should have been bare. When the first ripe ones came in, they were carried to her on cushions of leaves so they would not bruise on the walk. She ate them fresh, baked them into clafoutis-style custards, and had them preserved in brandy for the cold months. A bowl of cherries seems like nothing now, but a bowl of perfect cherries weeks ahead of nature, every single year, was a quiet announcement that the laws of the seasons did not apply inside these walls. Number 17. Hothouse pineapples. This is the one that truly stunned visitors. In a country where most people would never see one in their lifetime, the royal gardens at Versailles grew pineapples. Inside heated glass houses, gardeners burned fuel day and night to trick a tropical fruit into ripening in the cold heart of France. A single pineapple could take 2 years to grow and cost more than a laborer earned in months. They were so valuable that across Europe people rented them by the evening just to display on a table, then returned them uneaten. But Marie Antoinette did not display her pineapples. She ate them. Fresh, sliced, sometimes turned into ices. That was the ultimate luxury, taking something almost too precious to touch and simply enjoying it because you could. Second pattern break. Controversy incoming. Here is how a woman who nibbled biscuits became known as Madame Deficit, the name the people spat at her as the country went broke. It was sugar. It was hothouses burning fuel for a single fruit. It was confectioners spending days on candy that one person picked at. The individual portions were tiny, but the machine behind them was monstrous, and it never stopped. Pamphlets in Paris claimed she bathed in wine and devoured the wealth of France with a spoon. Most of it was lies. But the kernel of truth was real. Keeping one woman supplied with perfect, fresh, out-of-season delicacies cost a fortune, and the fortune came from a treasury that was already empty. The food was small, the bill was not. Number 16. Ice cream and sorbet. Frozen desserts were brand new technology, almost magic, and the queen could not get enough. Making them meant hauling ice down from the mountains in winter, packing it in straw underground, and praying it lasted into summer. Her kitchens whipped cream and fruit into frozen confections called fromages glaces, often molded to look like real cheeses or fruits to fool guests. She demanded new flavors constantly: strawberry, violet, bitter chocolate, coffee. To produce a single dish, servants turned and scraped the mixture by hand against ice and salt for the better part of an hour. There were no freezers, no machines, just human arms and a mountain of melting ice, all so that a queen could be handed something cold and sweet on a summer afternoon at a palace with no refrigeration at all. Number 15. Floating island. Île flottante, the floating island, was the queen's kind of theater on a plate. A cloud of sweetened egg whites was poached until it set into a soft pillow, then set adrift on a pool of pale yellow vanilla custard and crowned with threads of spun caramel that shattered like glass. It looked impossibly delicate, almost too pretty to eat, and that was exactly the appeal. Nothing about it was filling or practical. It was pure spectacle, designed to make a guest gasp before the first spoonful. The dish demanded a steady hand and perfect timing because the meringue collapsed if it sat and the caramel melted into syrup within minutes. Like the queen herself, it was beautiful, fragile, and built to be admired in the brief moment before it fell apart. Number 14. Strawberries eaten in her chemise. Here is the one that scandalized her own ladies. At her private hamlet, Marie Antoinette would slip out of her stiff court gowns and into a thin white cotton dress, little more than an undergarment by the standards of the day, and wander out to watch her strawberries and cherries being picked. Then she would eat them right there, standing in the field, fruit juice on her fingers, dressed in what the court considered her underwear. Her attendants were horrified. A queen of France did not appear in public half-dressed, and she certainly did not eat with her hands in a garden like a milkmaid. But that was the whole forbidden thrill of it. Out there, away from the rules, she could eat the way she actually wanted to. Free, simple, and human. Number 13. Trianon cheeses. At her own model farm, the queen kept cows, goats, and sheep, and from their milk her dairy produced soft, fresh cheeses that she prized above almost anything served at the grand table. These were her cheeses, from her animals, in her private world, and she served them to her inner circle as the height of rustic luxury. There was something almost rebellious in it. The most powerful kitchens in Europe stood ready to serve her anything, and what she wanted was a simple round of fresh cheese, the kind a peasant family might make. Of course, this peasant cheese came from a fantasy farm that cost a king's ransom to build and staff, but on her tongue, it tasted like freedom from everything Versailles demanded of her. Number 12. Fresh cream and butter. The queen developed an obsession with dairy so fresh it was almost still warm. At her hamlet, cream was skimmed, butter was churned, and creams and custards were set, all to be tasted within hours in a special tasting room built for the purpose. She loved vegetables cooked in cream, butter spread thick on warm bread, and bowls of cream eaten almost plain. To a girl raised in the rich dairy traditions of Austria, this tasted like childhood. The cruel irony hung over all of it. While Marie Antoinette sipped cream in a jeweled little dairy designed to look like a peasant's cottage, real peasants across France could not afford butter at all. The same food meant survival in one house and amusement in another. She never quite saw the difference. Third pattern break. Here is what the people could not forgive. The pleasure dairy, the toy farm, the milkmaid dress, the bowls of fresh cream. It was all built so a queen could play at being poor, while the actually poor were starving in the streets. The hamlet had a working dairy hidden away where staff did the real labor, and a beautiful tasting dairy where the queen and her friends sampled the results and pretended this was the simple life. To Marie Antoinette, it was innocent escape. To a Paris that could not buy bread, it was a slap in the face, a wealthy woman dressing up as them for fun. Food was the fault line of the whole revolution, and the queen kept dancing along it, eating cream, never feeling the ground shift. Number 11. Oysters. Step back inside the palace, and the menu turned ferociously rich. At the great dinners, oysters opened the meal by the hundreds, hauled live from the coast in barrels of seawater and ice, and rushed inland before they could spoil. They arrived gleaming on silver, eaten raw with nothing but their own brine, or baked under butter and crumbs. For a landlocked court, fresh oysters were a small miracle of logistics, requiring relays of fast carriages that ran the seafood in before the heat could turn it. Marie Antoinette and the royal table went through them in staggering numbers. Each one was a tiny, edible proof of wealth, a bite that said the entire coastline of France could be summoned to a dining room overnight if the queen felt like seafood. Number 10. Lobster. Like oysters, lobster came from the sea to a palace far from it, alive in barrels, expensive and difficult, and therefore exactly the sort of thing the court adored. It was poached, dressed in rich sauces, and served as a centerpiece that announced money the moment it hit the table. The royal kitchens prized its dramatic look, the deep red shell, and the theater of presentation. Marie Antoinette grew up in a court that prized show as much as flavor, and lobster delivered both. It was never about feeding people. A single lobster fed almost no one. It was about the statement, the impossible freshness, the proof that distance and difficulty meant nothing when you were the queen. The harder a food was to get, the more the court wanted it on the plate. Number 9. Breaded foie gras. The fattened liver of force-fed geese and ducks was the ultimate decadence of the French table, and the royal kitchens elevated it even further by breading and frying it until the outside crisped and the inside melted into pure butter. It was rich beyond reason, almost overwhelming, a food that existed only to be luxurious. Foie gras took weeks to produce per bird and was reserved almost entirely for the nobility. On the queen's table, it appeared as an appetizer, a small golden portion before the real meal even began. To eat foie gras as a starter, as merely the opening note of a dinner, was itself a kind of boast. It said there was so much abundance ahead that the richest food in France was just the warm-up. Number 8. Pâté. The pâtés of the royal kitchen were architecture as much as food, layered terrines of seasoned meat, game, and liver sealed in pastry and aged for days to deepen the flavor. Some were studded with truffles, some with pistachios, some encased in crusts decorated like little buildings. A great pate took skill that took years to learn, and it was sliced at the table to reveal the patterns hidden inside, a marbled cross-section meant to draw gasps. Marie Antoinette had grown up with rich charcuterie traditions, and she favored these dense, savory creations among all the heavy courses. They could be made ahead and kept, which made them practical, but in a royal kitchen, practicality was never the goal. The goal was to turn humble ground meat into a showpiece worthy of a queen. Number 7. Truffles. The black truffle was treasure pulled from the dirt, sniffed out by pigs and dogs in the oak forests of the south, and worth its weight in silver. The royal kitchens shaved it over eggs, buried whole truffles inside roasting birds, and folded it into sauces and pâtés to perfume the entire dish with its dark, earthy musk. There was no way to farm it, no way to rush it, no way to guarantee a supply. You found truffles or you did not, and that scarcity made them irresistible to a court obsessed with rarity. Marie Antoinette's table consumed them as a matter of course. A peasant might dig in the same soil his whole life and never taste one. The queen ate them shaved over breakfast, the smell of buried gold rising from the plate. Number 6. Boiled poultry. Now the surprise. After all the lobster and foie gras and truffles, what the queen actually preferred for her private meals was almost shockingly plain. Simply boiled or roasted chicken. Her own chambermaid recorded that, away from the grand spectacle, Marie Antoinette ate modestly. A little poultry, some vegetables, nothing extravagant. The richest table in Europe stood at her command, and given the choice, she reached for boiled fowl, like those in any ordinary household. There was rebellion in that plainness. The court expected the queen to perform abundance, to drown in luxury at every meal as proof of her station. Quietly choosing simple food was almost a refusal. It was her way of stepping out of the costume, even at the dinner table, and eating like the human being underneath the crown. Fourth pattern break. Here's the truth nobody expects. For Marie Antoinette, the most forbidden food of all was simplicity. A queen was not allowed to want plain bread, fresh milk, a bowl of berries, a boiled chicken eaten in peace. Her every meal was supposed to be a monument to French wealth and power, consumed in public, weighed by spies, reported across Europe. So when she craved the simple foods of her Austrian childhood, she had to chase them in secret, in a costume farm, in her underclothes, behind closed doors. The cruelest part is that this longing for simplicity, this very human wish to just eat something honest, was twisted by her enemies into proof of her decadence. She wanted less. They were sure she wanted more. Number 5. Croissants. Here is the taste of home she could never stop craving. Her chambermaid wrote that the only things the queen truly loved were her morning coffee and a certain kind of bread she had grown used to as a child in Vienna. That bread was the Kipferl, the crescent-shaped Austrian pastry that French legend says she helped introduce to Paris, where it slowly became the croissant the whole world now thinks of as French. Every morning at Versailles, the homesick girl from Austria reached for the flaky crescent that tasted like the nursery she had been ripped away from at 14. France gave her a crown, a husband, and endless luxury. What she missed was the breakfast of her childhood. The most beloved pastry in France may owe its existence to one queen's homesickness. Number 4. Medicinal chocolate pastilles. This is one almost no one knows. The queen's love of chocolate ran so deep that her court pharmacist, a man named Sulpice de Beauve, found a clever use for it. To get Marie Antoinette to take her bitter medicines, he hid the medicine inside chocolate, blending cocoa with almond milk and pressing it into smooth coin-shaped discs called pistoles. The queen would take her medicine happily because it tasted like candy. Those disguised chocolate coins are considered an ancestor of the fine chocolates sold in France to this day, and the shop de Beauve later founded still trades on its royal connection. Think about that. The queen's sweet tooth was so famous that her own doctor weaponized it, turning her treatment into a treat. She was the rare patient who looked forward to taking her pills. Number 3. Milk from a porcelain breast. Here is the object that still shocks people. For her pleasure dairy, a Sèvres porcelain service of 65 pieces was made, and among them were cups built to drink fresh milk from, shaped like a woman's breast, complete with a pink nipple, resting on a tripod of carved goat's heads. For 2 centuries, a delicious rumor has insisted they were molded from the queen's own bosom. They almost certainly were not, based instead on an ancient Greek drinking cup, and Marie Antoinette likely visited the dairy only once before the revolution swept it all away. But the legend stuck because it was the perfect symbol. A queen so out of touch, she sipped warm milk from porcelain breasts in a toy farm. The bowl saying is still reproduced today, and people still cannot believe it was real. Number 2. Hot chocolate. This was the daily ritual she could not live without. When Marie Antoinette married into France, she is said to have brought her own chocolate maker, a personal chocolatier whose only job was to craft her drinking chocolate exactly the way she liked it. And she liked it rich. Liquid chocolate, thick and dark, scented with orange blossom or whipped with cream, sometimes touched with vanilla, sometimes black currant. The chocolate of the queen became famous, a recipe whispered about and copied for generations. She drank it most mornings with her pastry, a warm, fragrant indulgence to begin each day in a palace that smelled, frankly, terrible. Chocolate was a delicacy then, closer to a drug than a drink, hugely expensive and faintly scandalous. The queen built a whole position in her household around guaranteeing she never had to start a morning without it. Number 1. Cake. It is the most famous thing she never did. The phrase, "let them eat cake," supposedly the queen's heartless reply to news that the people had no bread, was never spoken by Marie Antoinette. The story existed in writing years before she was even old enough to say it, and historians agree it was pinned on her later to make a hated queen seem monstrous. The original French word was not even cake, but brioche, the rich, buttery, egg-laden bread that ordinary French people could not afford. Here is the final irony of this entire list. The one food the world will forever connect to Marie Antoinette is a food she most likely never mentioned, attached to a sentence she never said. Of all the forbidden foods she truly loved in secret, the most famous one was a lie. Here is my challenge. Pick one of these and actually try it this week. The hot chocolate scented with orange blossom, the wild strawberries with cream, a real croissant eaten slow, the way a homesick girl once ate it at Versailles. Then come tell me in the comments which one you chose and whether you think the queen was a monster or just a teenager who missed her mother's kitchen. Because the woman they called Madame Deficit ate biscuits dipped in lemonade and craved boiled chicken in private. The history books gave her a cake she never wanted. Now you know what she actually loved.